Teddy, you were saying.
So what I was saying is that people have the ability to doubt, to challenge their faith, even to be angry with God. Yet the ultimate form of disrespect is to just reject someone, to turn your back on someone. And so all Christians, we all can have our doubt because God is an amorphous being. And so we don't see him, we don't hear him.
Please mute mics in the gallery. Thanks.
And so it's very easy to have doubts in these situations. And even the most religious people have had doubts, but they remain within the fold of the church, and not just of the church, just of the family. They don't seek to leave God's family, whether they're part of the church or not. But
then I would say that they didn't have
turn their back.
I would say they didn't have very deep doubts if they didn't leave the church.
Okay, so let's say with people that have deep doubts, it is still possible, and there have been people who have done this, people who are prominent in the church, who have deep doubts, yet they still keep on.
Okay, then it's not, my contention is it's not a deep doubt if you're still doing it within the context of the church. You can have doubts that your doctor knows what they're talking about when they prescribe you a drug, but you just don't, you personally don't think it would work, but you don't think your doctor's a quack, so you'll try it. That's not a very deep doubt. It is a doubt, but it's not a deep doubt. However, if you are fairly convinced that your doctor's a quack and you're still taking the medicine, then you're crazy or you don't have doubts.
Well, I disagree with that, because when something is called a crisis of faith, that's a deep doubt. That's not just, a little bit like,
well, okay, what qualifies as a crisis of faith for you?
A crisis of faith is deep, deep doubt. Well, a crisis of faith is what caused you to leave Christianity. And so my point is...
Okay, so that's a real doubt. I'm saying of the people that you're talking about, if they never left the church and they dealt with their quote unquote doubts in the context of that same faith environment, they never walked away. They never sought answers outside of that. And they kept going back to the same people who were feeding them the things that they doubt. Then they didn't really doubt. It wasn't that deep.
Perhaps not feeding in terms of being fed information. Perhaps it's just looking to the Bible, looking just into their soul and in terms of what they believe.
Okay, but they did it in the context of the
other extrinsic. There are many reasons to think, and this is not the show to do it because we can't handle every topic, but there are many different ways to arrive at there being a God. And then there's the question of which God. But my point is that there is such a thing as having serious doubts, even a crisis of faith, and yet still persisting as if, you're still doing what you need to do.
That I fail to see how it's actually a crisis
not
of
reject
faith.
God. No, but did you know that for saints, that some denominations, it's a known thing that many people who have, prior to their becoming saints, underwent a crisis of faith?
I don't know what you're talking about when you use that term. Just using that term doesn't define it.
The most serious of doubts that would cause people to deconvert. That's what I mean.
Okay, but they didn't deconvert.
Right, but
they
that's
didn't
a
even
choice.
stop going to church. They didn't stop listening to the sermons every week. They didn't stop reading their Bibles devotionally. They didn't stop praying the same prayers that they prayed. They didn't stop whatever religious rituals they were doing. So I hardly see the crisis of faith that you're talking about.
But it does exist, and
Wait a
because
minute. How? What
because they have,
what does doubt even mean in a
because
religious
these
context
people are
if
you
it doesn't move you to try something else?
because you don't have to move from something. For example, let's say if a loved one dies and you are incredibly sad and depressed, yet you force yourself to, to just go on instead of, for example, committing suicide, like where you can't handle the pain. You just persist through it. You persist through it because something tells you that quitting is not the right answer. And so even though we need to understand that, and I think I've brought him up before, my professor, my philosophy professor from college, Dr. Robert Kane, he had talked about how what makes us humans think that we are capable of understanding everything that there is to be understood about God, about the universe. We need to have some humility, not hubris, when it comes to that, and understand how small we are.
I fail to
And
see how that's
so
relevant.
sometimes just because we cannot understand things, for example, David, and let's get back to what this whole show really is about.
Okay.
You have talked to me, you have
Hold
mentioned
on. I'm not done with your last point. I don't
okay.
understand your last point. You're talking about doubt here. And I've done a lot of thought and writing about doubt, and you made the implication that my doubt was not an acceptable doubt because it led me to leaving the church, which must mean that I wasn't actually a Christian at
No,
all, because
I
I
didn't.
had the kind of doubt that would cause me to leave the church. So the only kind of acceptable doubt is the doubt that doesn't actually cause you to change your status as a quote unquote believer.
I didn't. Okay, first of all, let let's go back to what you said. Acceptable doubt. I never said that there was a certain type of doubt that was acceptable versus unacceptable. Okay, doubt
I
is doubt.
suggest the reader roll back the tape if they can stand it, but sure, go ahead.
Okay, I'm saying doubt is what goes on in the mind, but deconverting and then announcing that you're an atheist and then
So as long
creating
as
a
your doubt doesn't
podcast.
lead to action, is that what you're saying?
Well, that exactly is what I
Okay,
am
so
saying.
tell me if is faith without action, faith without works, is that considered faith? Because let me help you out because I know the Bible isn't your strong suit. Faith without works is dead being alone. That's James. So if faith without works is empty, I would contend that doubt without works is empty as well. It's
Okay,
just a bumper sticker. And I
it
don't give a damn about anyone's crisis of faith if it didn't cause them to act.
no, because there is something greater than our own minds and our own opinion, and
Is
nothing that
faith
is
without
greater is
works
God.
good for you?
That is, look,
Why do
my
you
my
have a
opinion,
different standard
my
for faith than
opinion,
you do for doubt?
let me give you what I believe is the true answer to the whole situation about faith and works. Okay. I do not believe, I mean, the Bible clearly tells us that we cannot earn our way into heaven lest we be able to boast about it.
Didn't suggest it.
So, my point is
I
that
was just
when you
quoting
believe,
Bible.
okay, so when you believe, David, then that will naturally inspire one to do good things.
And when you
Okay,
don't
and
believe
fall
that
in
that would
line.
inspire you to stop the religious things you were
No,
doing.
but let me tell you something. When we talk about all of these moral atheists,
Well, I'm
most
sorry,
of
I'm
them,
still trying to understand your double standard when it comes to faith and doubt.
Okay, it's not a double standard. But with all these moral atheists, most of them were Christians before. So their morality is soaked with the morality that is driven by the Ten Commandments. And then the other people, such as the Darrens of this world, the atheists who grew up as atheists, they tend to pick up, because of peer pressure and laws, what is moral. And perhaps also, just as Marvin has talked about, and others, God gives us a conscience. And so there is that voice inside.
I've lost your point, and I don't see how that,
my point is that we can still do good works, whether we are with God or without him.
Okay,
but
great.
The thing that atheists love, they love the liberation. They love to be able to do that which they want to do. They don't want to be governed and to be told what they can and cannot do.
Do you realize that I've done more good works as an atheist than I ever did as a Christian?
But your values were brought to you.
Okay, so let me tell you, I do the good works that I do, not to boast about them. In fact, I will never talk about most of them publicly. I do them because they're exactly the things I want to do.
Yes, but we know where you got your values from, David.
I don't care.
You didn't get your values from a dog on the streets.
Let's say you're partly right in that living in society and having grown up in a southern United States Bible Belt environment, soaked up many of my values from that system. So what? What's your point? That doesn't mean that I believe in the God that Christians say are behind those values, but I have soaked up those values nonetheless. So what?
Right. I understand.
Okay, then I don't understand your point.
My point is that you don't have to change that which you do just because you have doubts, even if it's a crisis of faith.
I didn't change good works that I did. What I did was change my faith position in my works regarding my faith. So for instance, if I don't believe there's a God listening to prayer, it doesn't make sense to praying.
So let's get back to the nitty gritty.
Hang on. If you do believe there's a God listening to prayers, then it makes sense for you to say. And if you're saying you have a crisis of faith, but you're still praying, I would say you don't have a crisis of faith. You don't have anything that I recognize as doubt at all, because you're still praying.
There we go. So tell me, and you see, this is something that I've wanted to discuss with you, because you and others within our group, it appears from things.
Okay, are we done with the doubt thing before we move on to a new thing?
No, we're okay. Oh, okay. Listen. I believe that unanswered prayers, and also
okay, we're done with doubt then, right? Because we're going to move on to unanswered prayers.
We're having a conversation, David. We don't have talking.
Okay, but it's hard to have a conversation if we're just flitting about from point to point to point.
We've done it
not actually acknowledging the things that are being said.
Okay, we're having a conversation, and conversations are fluid. All right.
Okay, so I don't know why I should care about any part of the conversation.
And that's just going to move. And you're right now trying to dodge and weave.
No, I am trying to actually address the point that you thought was important a minute ago.
All right.
Now it's not important.
Then quit trying to characterize me as trying to change the subject when I am trying to broaden it to bring it back to what the whole point of this discussion
unanswered prayer. Go ahead. Go.
Okay. So in having talked with you and some of the others, and when, the very first show that I was on, it was about miracles. I just kept getting more than just the vibe. I mean, things that y'all were saying, that prayers going unanswered the way that you all wanted them to be answered, that had a lot to do with doubting that God was real and that God was listening to your prayers, and that, the whole, pray for something and you get it, as if God is a wishing well. I feel that, as well as you have mentioned in the past, a long time ago, that, you asked God to give you a sign and you didn't get that sign. And so I think that too helped, between, unanswered prayers
Okay,
and
right,
God
right, and
refusing to give
right.
you the sign.
True and
Okay.
true. So
Okay.
what's your point?
So my point is let's discuss that a little bit, because I
Okay.
really do think that is at the foundation, at the core of why so many people lose their faith. They're thinking,
Okay, so
how can
can I say
God?
something about that, or
Sure,
are you just going to
sure.
tell me what I
No, go
think?
ahead,
Okay,
please.
cool. So yeah, I would say that unanswered prayers are a big part, not just of why I left the faith, but why anyone should leave the faith, and why many people do. It's not the simple idea that somehow we ask for a Hummer and all we got was a Toyota Corolla. That's not it at all. And if that's how you're characterizing it, then you are dishonestly characterizing what anyone
I'm not
has to
trying to
say about this
characterize it
subject.
that way. I'm not
So
trying to
okay,
characterize
but
it like,
that really is how it comes
well,
across.
for
And
some,
at the end of the day, that's what Christians end up uh,
look, it can
kind of saying, my
look,
friends all have Porsches. I must make amends.
okay, you're making a
Oh Lord, won't you
mockery
buy
out
me a
of that.
Mercedes Benz? You know that song?
Yeah, you're
That's
making a mockery of the
okay,
point that I made.
but you're making a mockery of
I'm not
what we
trying
went
to
through.
suggest
Great.
that somebody,
This is why I want to tell you what I actually think, as opposed to anyone listening to your characterization of what I
okay,
think.
look,
So
I'm not
what I
trying to,
actually think, Teddy, and is that unanswered prayers are an important aspect because it represents a broken promise. It represents unreliability. So why would we expect prayers to be answered? That's a question that should be asked. And that's often where these conversations come to. Well, maybe you had the wrong expectations. So I think that that's something that we can look at theologically. And without digging too much into the theology, I would simply say that I felt like my expectations of God answering prayer, to the point that Jesus says you should pray as if you have already received that which you have asked for. And if you don't pray with that kind of confidence, then don't expect to get it.
hey,
So
but
this,
what
hold
does that
on,
mean? What does that
Teddy,
mean?
this is the types of things that we as Christians are told. And so we do have certain expectations that at some point, some kind of prayer somewhere along the line would be answered in a way that we recognize a prayer has been
But
answered.
see, this is the
When
thing.
when that does not happen, not just once, but repeatedly, then what it feels like is that God has broken his promise to answer our prayers. Not that he didn't give us a Mercedes Benz, but that he didn't answer any of our prayers, that we prayed in exactly the best way we could figure out how to pray, that he told
I
us to pray.
understand what you're saying, David.
Okay, it comes down to either God answers prayers or he doesn't answer prayers. And if he doesn't answer prayers, then he's a fucking liar who said that
No,
he does.
it
And
comes down to a
we have a
misunderstanding.
right, excuse me, we have a right to walk away when the contract of I answer prayers if you pray them in a certain way, when that's broken, we can say, okay, then maybe this thing that I believed in isn't true. That's legitimate.
Okay, no, let me tell you why it's not legitimate. Because, and I truly, I do understand what you're saying. I do. And I can understand how that feeling of discouragement in not having prayers answered as you wish can cause doubt.
Wait a minute. Sorry. The qualification as you wish. I would go with at all, because if you're saying that he answers prayer with no, that's just tantamount to saying God doesn't answer prayers. Because
No,
maybe
it's
he'll
not.
do
That's
it,
not
maybe he won't
logical.
do it. You'll never know, because the answer
It
might be
says,
no.
"Thy will be done." When ultimately, when we
If
pray,
the only prayer is God, will you do what you're going to do anyway? Then that's not a prayer.
but ultimately, prayer. What is prayer really about? It is about that relationship with God.
Okay,
Why
stop
we were
trying to
created.
pretend like all prayers. This is why I don't want to have a theological conversation with you, Teddy. Stop trying to pretend like all prayers are one kind of prayer. There are prayers, what we can
I
call,
agree with you.
excuse me, what we call prayers of supplication. A prayer of supplication is when you ask someone for something. It is when a peasant comes to the king's court, and he asks the king. He beseeches the king. He prays, as it were, to the king to grant an extra measure of funds for his farm, because it was a bad season and he needs some mercy, and he needs more farm equipment. Lord, will you please grant me this farm equipment? And a king might say, yeah, you know what, you've been a pretty good farmer. It has been a bad weather. I'm going to grant you some farm equipment. That's a prayer of supplication. That's exactly the kind of prayer in the Bible that I am talking about. So please don't try to conflate this with other kinds of prayer, such as prayers of thanksgiving or prayers of praise, or, this is the kind of trick that
I'm
Christians
not.
try to play
I'm not
when we're talking
disagreeing
about
with you.
unanswered prayers.
Look, I understand what you're saying. I
Good.
agree with you that there are
Then
different
don't try
types
to
of prayer.
drag in other kinds of prayers
No,
that
but
don't
my point
reflect.
is that even when we ask a parent for something, just the fact that one is asking and coming to someone, that is part of a relationship. Okay. Now, I
Okay,
mean, I guess you can ask the government, and that's still part of a relationship too, the governed and the
sure,
governing.
but the language
But
in the Bible isn't pray to me and maybe I'll think about it because I'm your parent and I'll
okay,
decide.
and that's what I
That
want,
wasn't the promise.
okay,
Okay?
but
And
that's what I
if
want
that's all
to.
it, excuse me, if that's all it was, then no one ever has any right to expect any prayers to be answered from God. And Christians should just say,
Correct.
God doesn't answer
Correct.
prayer. Right. Well, that is theological nonsense,
No, it
Teddy.
is not. And that's what I wanted to discuss with you, because there are some denominations that tend to, part of what
What
is,
you're saying is that there are no prayers of supplication, that the Bible has not, in fact, set us up to expect that prayers of
you can
supplications will be
ask. It's
answered.
like petitioning God, asking
Right. That's
him.
not how it's presented in the Bible. It's not presented in some kind of cynical, well, you can
You are
ask.
taking a
You can
fundamentally
ask what you want
approach.
to. Maybe God will, maybe you won't.
You are
You won't, but
taking
you can ask. That's
let's
not how
delve
it's presented, Teddy.
let's delve into the passage that you talked about, which is, praying with the fervor as if.
I'm not going to have a theological
But hold
conversation with you,
on,
Teddy.
this is
You're not,
David.
Teddy. You're
David.
not. That's not your strong suit. Okay.
Well, David, argumentation is my strong suit. Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Well, can we agree on something? So,
Right. So, and
Teddy,
stop being
Teddy,
afraid. Stop being afraid of
Teddy,
what's about to come out of my
you
mouth.
don't have to try to make a theological argument here
You don't
for
have to
my
be
point.
afraid of what I'm going to say, David.
So if you just understand the point that I'm making, I can save you some trouble. I can save the
Well, I
audience
don't.
some trouble.
I
If
I'm happy to
if
have trouble.
if I am wrong about my expectation that God says that he answers prayers, great. You Christians can walk away thinking, well, you were just wrong about the Bible never says that God answers prayers, and that would be the end of it. Because all I need to say is, well, my understanding based on my teaching and my study is that God says that he would answer prayers. And if he does not answer prayers, then he is not God. So, once again, you can say that I'm wrong about that, and we can just agree to disagree. And
David,
I
how about we
also,
do
I'm
the
and I'm
business?
curious as to how many Christians would come up alongside you and say, "You're right, Teddy. God never gave that expectation at all." Great. That's not the brand of Christianity that I ever believed in.
Okay, but you know what? Who cares about what brand of Christianity one
It's
believes
not
in?
that. That's not
How
the God I
about,
believed in.
how about we search for the truth in whatever God you believed in? Maybe
Well,
your
okay, but I thought we were talking
understanding.
about why I walked away from
Okay,
the
but I
faith.
want
It,
to
so
engage
do
with
you
you.
acknowledge that if God did promise to answer prayers, and if he does not answer prayers, that would be a good reason to walk away?
It you're forgetting a critical
Would
point.
you agree
Did he say
that
no?
if
Listen, you are leaving
this is a
out a critical point.
counterfactual, Teddy?
Okay,
So
see, when I keep
try to
trying to
follow
make
me. I know you
headway,
don't believe any of this.
when I
If
keep trying to make headway, you keep
if
trying to shut
I
me
will
down.
let you make headway. I need you
Afraid of
to
the
answer this,
logic.
Teddy. I need you to answer this because I'm
You
not
are
going to
leaving
understand
out.
what you're talking about if you don't.
You are giving me an incomplete
I am
argument.
giving you a complete thought
It is
for
not a
me.
complete argument because
If
part of in order
let me
to
try this again. If
just let me
if
get my point in
I'm sorry.
because
This
you're
is
afraid of it.
I am going to let you get any point across. I need you to interact with
I'm
this.
telling you, you are missing a
If
critical point.
if
Part of the
God,
point is
I,
that
do
you
you
must say,
do you,
you must have in it that God says that he will answer the prayer exactly the way you want it answered.
okay, this is a point that you can make after you interact with my question because you're
Okay,
the
well,
one who
I
brought up
disagree with the
unanswered
premise. I
prayers.
disagree with your
So
arguments.
do you want to know what's in my mind or not? I'm trying to
You
get
said
you.
I want to interact
I'm
with
trying to
you.
make some connection there. If God has promised that He would answer prayers, and I have found
Answer
that,
prayers
excuse
how?
me,
Exactly how you
and
want or not.
Teddy,
That's a
we're
critical
at a
point.
point where we're not able to talk because you're not able to listen.
Because you're
If
not making sense.
okay, I'm going to try again. I'm going to keep trying, so
Okay, praying,
that no one
you
can
got
say that I didn't make an effort
you
here.
can you got to put in the part about whether God agrees.
I can ask
Did
my
God
question
say he will?
any way I
Did
want to
God
ask it,
say?
Teddy.
Did God
You can
say that
just
he will
tell
give
me if
you
it is a
everything you
correct.
want the way you
You
want
can
it?
tell me if
No,
it's correct or
you're
not.
you're throwing in a
You're
promise that God made that he never made.
okay,
And
Teddy.
not only that, you fall into the
I'm gonna try muting your mic so that the audience can at least hear the question. All right, and just respectfully try to manage that.
go
Uh,
ahead. Go ahead.
okay, I'm not
But
going to
don't
mute
get
your
me
mic.
answering
Then
something until I have my
Teddy,
explanation.
if God has promised that he will answer prayers, regardless of the criteria, and I have, to the best of my ability, met that criteria and finds that he does not answer prayers, would that not be a justifiable reason to walk away?
It depends on what your criteria is. Is your
I don't
criteria
care what my
no, no, no,
criteria
no, no,
is.
no, no. Okay.
Whatever
Wait,
his
no, 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 no.
criteria
Stop,
is.
David. Okay, David. See, what I'm saying is you're being so shallow. What is your criteria? Is your criteria that a prayer is only answered if it is me getting what I want? That is your criteria. Your criteria is it's not an answered prayer if you don't get what you want. Well, that's baloney. That's ridiculous because God never said that he will give you exactly what you want the way you want it. And the other thing is that God, when you're misinterpreting, your part of a literal translation is one must take things in context. When God says pray as if it's been answered, what does that mean? That does not mean have the certainty that you're going to get what you asked for. No, David, that is not what that means. What that means is just have this internal confidence that God is listening. and have that confidence within you. That is what that means. It's not you're going to get what you want. So if you don't get what you want, God must not be real. That does not follow. That's a non sequitur right there.
Right. So if God has promised that he would answer prayers, and it turns out that he doesn't, would that not be a good reason to walk away?
It depends. You're simplifying this without delving into how a person is establishing criteria for whether a prayer is answered.
It doesn't matter.
It does matter.
If whatever God meant, if he doesn't follow through with it, that would be good reason to walk away.
But it has to
Okay,
be
so therefore, let's say I am mistaken about what God meant. I don't mind throwing that poison pill into the mix because it's not actually a poison pill.
That's what it's
No,
about.
it's not a poison pill. If I am mistaken about what God meant when he said it, and he did not fulfill my expectations of what it meant, I am still justified to walk away, because whatever the agreement was supposed to be, I had a different kind of agreement in mind. The kind of God that I believed in did not exist. Now, if you want to say a different God existed and I just believed in the wrong God, great. You can say that, no problem with that. In fact, I think that's the best position that a Christian could probably take. Now, I don't think that you're going to win any theological debates when you do, but I think that's the best. I think that's the best thing that you could say. But logically, I am still justified in walking away.
No, okay, you use the word justified, and that's an interesting word because that opens up a whole can of
I'm justified. I have a good reason to walk away. The God that I believed in, whether or not it was the real God or not, did not exist or did not follow through with that promise that I believed we agreed on.
Okay, whether somebody is justified, I mean, and I think that that can take many definitions, but in the way that
is that true?
Okay, well, let me explain why, and it goes back to what Professor Kane said.
I don't know who
and
Professor
that is,
Kane
and that
is.
is, I mentioned the philosophy professor that I have that in college that talked about how as humans, we need to have the humility to understand that there are many things in this world and the universe about God.
Right. So there might. I'm sorry. Okay, I can. That's irrelevant. But I can give you that there may be some God in the universe that I don't know about and that I never believed in. The God that I believed in didn't exist.
Okay, so perhaps there are certain aspects of the way you were taught certain religious
why can't you acknowledge that that the God that I believed, that I was justified in walking away from the God that I believed in?
Okay,
that's an easy one. You can just nod your head and say yes, you agree.
The God that you believed in, but the God that you believed in is not an accurate representation of what I think.
Great. So you would agree then that the God that I believed in doesn't exist?
But that does not.
Would you agree that the God that I believed in doesn't exist?
The God as you defined him incorrectly.
The God that I believed in, look, the God is what we define, whether correct or not.
Okay,
so
look, if I say that David, there's certain things that I believe about you, and if I'm wrong about one or two or three of the things that I believed about you, does that make you not exist?
Well, it depends. It depends on the things that you say. For instance, if you thought that my hair was brown instead of black, yeah, you're probably talking about the same guy. If you're talking about someone who could take flight and fly to the moon without an airplane or a helicopter, then you're wrong. That guy doesn't exist.
About character. I'm talking more about character.
Okay, well,
And,
no, I
so
don't,
if
hold
I
on.
say,
No, that sounds like a real subject change, and it sounds like you're trying to
oh, no,
get
it's
out of a
not. It's getting to the subject.
very easy question. Is it not? This should be an easy yes for you. This
No,
is an easy
it's
win.
an easy,
Is it not
it's a
justified
good
for me to
question.
say that the God I believed in doesn't exist? Yes or no?
This is clever argumentation. This is
Thank
sophistry.
you.
Okay, this is not getting down to try to discover.
I like to think that I am clever, but
Okay,
what is the answer?
sophistry is not getting down to truth.
How is it sophistry?
I am about to tell you. Because if I say, for example, David, if I say that, there are certain things that I think I understand about you as a person, and I know a bunch of different things about
This
you as a
sounds like
person.
sophistry.
No. If I say, there are a number of different attributes that you have, and if I'm mistaken about one or more of them, does that mean that the David Johnson that I know does not exist? No, it means that I'm mistaken about some things about you. So I mean, you're trying to throw out, as they say, you're trying to throw out the baby with the bathwater. How about just correcting a couple
This
of
this really is sophistry. It's a way of changing the subject. Tell me, is when the Muslims worship Allah, does that God exist or not? Is it the same God as the God you worship, or is it a different God than the God you worship?
I have not studied in any depth.
Oh, come on. You're willing to make judgments about my God.
My understanding is that there are some important differences between.
Come on. Do the Muslims, is Allah the same God as Yahweh?
Actually,
yes
that's
or
a
no?
great, you know what? Actually, David, that's a great example now that I think about it.
Yeah. Now what's the answer?
Okay, the answer is that we are praying to the same God, but they are under the impression that God has some different attributes.
Okay, so the God with the attributes that they believe in doesn't exist.
The attributes that they believe in may or may not.
Yeah, but their God is defined by the attributes.
Okay, you can be mistaken about.
God is defined by his attributes, though.
Look, we are all defined by our attributes, but you might misattribute a characteristic to me, but that doesn't make me disappear. Okay, that doesn't make me non-existent.
But it does actually make the person. It makes the person that I had in my mind non-existent.
No, it doesn't, because there's
does.
So much more. It
actually does. If I hold a picture of you in my mind that is simply inaccurate, and is not at all a correct portrait of you, the portrait of you that I have in my mind, the Teddy of my imagination, if you please forgive this gross notion, the Teddy of my fantasies doesn't exist if it does not equal the Teddy of reality.
It depends on how bad the distorted view and misunderstanding is.
Well, how bad is my distorted view of prayer, answered prayer?
Okay, that's what I was answering before, and that is, you are taking that meaning as being in a very improperly.
Okay, but I disagree with you.
You have to take in context.
Once again, we don't need to get into a theological argument. I simply disagree with you. I know exactly what I meant. I know exactly what I thought. I know exactly the God that I worshipped.
Yes, but that was this whole wishing.
What you're trying to say is that I didn't know what God I was worshiping. And that's just bullshit. You can't. No. I know exactly the God I worshipped. And if that God did not exist or did not have those attributes that I attributed to him, that God doesn't exist. Now, once again, maybe some other God with some other attributes exist.
again, baby, you're throwing out the baby with the bathwater. You believe that he created the universe. You have said how you were
Just
very
because my God and your God shared some attributes doesn't mean that they're the same ones.
They shared a lot of attributes, and we can
So
all be
I
honest.
share a lot of attributes with my brothers. I've got 2 brothers. We share so many attributes, people confuse us all the time. I assure you, we're distinct people. We're not the
I
same people.
understand that, but we can also misunderstand certain attributes in one person. And just because we misunderstand them doesn't mean they don't exist.
Okay, well, the attributes that I had for God were important to me. They were not negotiable.
Sure, because everybody wants to get what they want.
Hold on. Well, that's fine, but you can say that I've got the wrong attributes and that I've got the wrong God. But the attributes of the God that I worship were not negotiable.
Okay, that's because you had a gimme, gimme, gimme mentality when it came.
Well, no, if you were to tell me that the God if you were to tell me that the God I worshiped was not all powerful, that was one of the attributes of the God that I worshiped. If you said that he was only somewhat powerful, I would say that we're not talking about the same God. Because that attribute is non-negotiable. The God I believed in was all powerful. And if you're saying that you believe in a God that's not all powerful, we're not talking about the same thing.
All powerful in terms of doing that which he wants.
Okay, I can just hear, I'm sorry, stop trying to harmonize our gods, Teddy. I don't give a damn about your God. Okay, I'm telling you about my God, and my God, as it turns out, didn't exist.
Because you
again, I don't give a damn about your God concept, Teddy.
You had expectations.
Don't care about your God concept.
When you don't,
I don't care about your God concept.
Okay, I'm not talking about my God concept. I'm talking about in general.
I don't care about a general God concept. I didn't believe in a general God. I believed in a very specific God.
And then those expectations don't come to fruition. Well, then, yeah, you're going to be disappointed and you're going to think,
Teddy, I believed in a specific God, and it should be a trivial thing to say, well, the specific God you believed in doesn't exist.
Now, how about you then look to see and to salvage the huge chunk of the God that you believed in that does exist?
There is no chunk of the God I believed in that does exist, because my God was an all, my God was an all or nothing God.
No,
my God was not a Mr. Potato Head where you can take off some parts here and put on some parts there. Okay, we've got the feet in the right place, but let's change the nose out. No, that wasn't it. If it wasn't the whole God with the whole attributes, it wasn't God at all.
But I'm talking about a misunderstanding with regard to prayer.
No, yeah, you're talking about a misunderstanding. I'm talking about a different God. If you're saying that there is a correct God out there, if there's a correct God, I'm not talking about that God. I'm talking about the God that I believed in and the God that I lost faith in, the God that I walked away from.
There's not a correct God. There is God. Excuse me. And whether we are understanding who he is and having that sense of truth about him, that's what it's all about. He is.
You know why you have to keep saying this kind of wishy-washy thing, Teddy? It's because you actually don't know. You actually don't know anything about your God. And so you have to keep all of your options open.
I know a lot about my God.
Well, now I don't think you do know a lot about your God.
I think I do.
You don't know, for instance, what kind of punishment he has in store. You don't know what kind of reward he has in store. You don't know exactly what he wants from his people.
That is because we don't know if it's the use of figurative language.
Okay, so you don't actually know a lot about your God. I knew a lot about my God.
We know when people examine,
you just believe in a generic God that you can pour all of your hopes and dreams into. I didn't believe in that kind of God. I'm gonna tell you that right now. That's not the kind of Christian I was. The kind of God that you're espousing, that God never existed for me.
Let's, for example, let's say if I tell somebody, hey, you better not do this, whatever, a certain action. Because if you do, well, pardon the pun, there's going to be hell to pay. Okay. Now, we don't know, the other person, they don't know if I mean that figuratively or literally, but we as smart people can figure out they are trying to give us a very stern warning. Do not do this because bad things will happen. Now, in terms of the specificity of what those bad things are, no, we can't be sure. We don't know if the hellfire and brimstone, if that's figurative language or if that really is what it's going to be. But smart people do not take risks with things. And I shouldn't say smart because, and I apologize about that. All of y'all are very smart that I'm talking to. So my apologies for that. But in terms of just the wisdom of making reckless choices in not paying attention to warnings, dire warnings. And that's what I'm talking about.
Okay,
So it doesn't
Teddy. So
matter
once
whether
once again, is because you seem to think that there is some kind of generic God that sits above and beyond the God that I believed in. You just have a completely misapprehension of where my mindset is and where it's ever going to go. The God that I believed in also had a very specific hell. If the God that I believed in was not the God of answered prayers, he's also not the God with any kind of hell to fear. I fear no hell because the God I believed in does not exist.
that's
Now, once
very simple.
again, if your God exists and he lives in your heart, that's fantastic. God bless you. But that God never lived in my heart.
That's
I've,
very
I've never I've never
self-serving.
been a prophet of your God. I think
That's
your
very
God is a
self-serving.
piece of shit. So
It's very
I would have
self-serving.
said
That's
that as a
not a
Christian. So I can say that I have good reason, and that unanswered prayer would be a good reason to disbelieve in the God that I believed in. And if there are any other people out there listening to this who had the same concept of God, unanswered prayer is a good reason for them to not believe in that God too. Once
What's
again, if there's another God, that's a different conversation. Don't give a damn about him, but that's fine. That's a different conversation. It's not my God. Don't care.
this is a whole shallow argument. Like, oh, I'm going to take my ball and leave it home, and go home because
I
the God's
don't
not
care
exactly
if
what I
it's
want.
shallow
That
to
is
you,
not.
Teddy.
What makes
So
you think?
what
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 makes
else?
you think that any human is going to have just the tightest of understandings of who and what God
Okay, well,
is?
if
That's
God
silly.
doesn't want, if God
Ridiculous.
doesn't want to reveal Himself in a way that humans have a good
There
understanding of
is
who He is,
mystery about God, and that's one of the
then
things.
well,
A lot of
fuck
the
mystery. I'm
Protestants,
not a mystery guy. I'm not
a
going
lot of
through a
the
mystery box.
Protestants are not about
This is not a
mystery.
game to me. Life is not a puzzle. I'm
And
not.
nobody's
That's
saying it's a game, but
okay. Well, no, it's
it's
a
unwise
mystery.
to not realize that there are things that we will never understand. And that was what was so brilliant about what Professor Kane said.
Okay,
There are
so
things, and
Teddy,
we have to have
we've talked
humility.
about prayer. What else? What else you got?
So, in terms of leaving the church instead of just trying to figure things out, there's the question of, so David, if somehow I managed to convince you that the God of Christianity is real, are you going to become a Christian again?
I don't understand the purpose of the question.
Well, I mean, that's about as simple of a question as one can
No, I
ask.
understand
If
the question. I don't
if
understand the
it
purpose.
were
Excuse me. I don't understand the purpose of the question.
it, the purpose of the question is to see whether it really is about not believing or if it's not wanting to fall in line and to be subservient to a God that is superior to all of us.
Well,
Because I
these things
think,
aren't mutually exclusive. So I don't believe, um,
let's
and
say,
excuse me, I don't believe, and that is independent from I'm also not subservient.
forget the subservient. Let's say that's why I wanted an answer from you.
Okay, so you want me to engage in a counterfactual, like I wanted you to engage a little bit ago, so that's fair. The answer to that question is I would not be subservient to anyone at this stage in my life because
There you
I'm a
go.
grown
Thank
ass
you.
adult.
There's your
I
honesty.
wouldn't
There it
I wouldn't
is.
be
Right
subservient to a president, a king, a boss,
there. See,
a spouse.
that's,
Um,
you hate
I
God.
wouldn't be subservient to a person in front of me with a gun,
You see,
demanding my wallet. So,
that is why
be-
I've always told
well, wait a
you.
minute. Are you saying that because I don't want to be somebody's slave that I'm bad?
You don't want to be
I've seen
God.
slavery. I don't want to be that.
If you don't accept being subservient
Wait, whoa, 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 whoa,
to
whoa, whoa,
God,
whoa, whoa, whoa,
that
whoa.
is
Wait a
bad.
minute. What is this Christian fixation with slavery? I
Oh,
don't want
come
to be
on
a
now.
slave.
Oh, this is this argument is, you are totally trying to straw man this
Do
situation.
you like that?
You're bringing
Then
slavery in there.
is there any
You'll
room in your
kill the
law
little
firm for one
babies.
more?
Let's kill all the babies, especially the
Yeah.
black babies who were dying in even greater
Right.
number.
So you're the one who's saying that I'm a bad person for not wanting to be a slave.
No, I am.
Okay, your word is
okay, wait a
subservience.
minute.
I don't see any
There's a
difference
difference
between
between.
subservience and slavery.
Okay,
Sorry.
because you are totally straw manning this, because you were trying to trigger everybody into having
You
the
don't
imagery
think subservience
of
is
Punta
triggering?
Kinte
Excuse me,
in the South.
subservience is service, servant, a doulos.
No,
Sorry. The Greek word in the New Testament is doulos. It means slave.
it was eved. Remember, we had the whole slavery
That would be
debate,
Hebrew,
which
but
I won.
that would be Hebrew.
Yeah, I agree.
I said Greek.
I know, and I changed it to
You're
the
a Greek,
Old
right?
Testament. The
So
slavery
you
stuff,
should know doulos, right?
that was in the Old Testament, and so the Hebrew
Okay,
is
well,
what
why are you changing the
controls.
subject
And
of that?
Eved
I
is
said
servant.
doulos and specifically referred to the
Yes.
New Testament term. Try to keep up,
Okay,
Teddy.
but the slavery, no, you keep up. The slavery that we debated over was slavery.
I'm not
in
referring to
the
any
Old
slavery we
Testament.
debated over in the past. I'm
Okay.
referring to your idea that we should be subservient, doulos
well,
to anybody.
Where it
I am
says
nobody's
being a slave,
doulos.
but where it says being a slave for Christ, they don't mean a slave like in chains, like in the South.
Well, you know,
They
that's
mean
funny because
servant
I'm
with the
sorry, Paul
Hebrew.
used the analogy of being in chains. Now, granted,
It's
at one
figurative.
point,
Stop getting into all this fundamentalist stuff. I mean,
oh, it's just
people,
Bible, Teddy. I'm
no,
just pointing out the Bible. That's why I don't want to talk about theology with you. You have no idea what the Bible says.
But you are a writer, David. Do you not use figurative language to make your writing more interesting and more compelling?
Sure, but I don't use figures that would be in
I mean,
themselves
Jesus-
offensive. I don't,
was the
for
Lamb.
instance, suggest that anyone should be subservient to someone else.
David, Jesus is the lamb. Should we go out and shear him and make
if it would
nice
give you a
wool?
nice coat, I don't see why not. But-
it's figurative language.
Well, look,
Wake
you're
up
saying
and
language.
Smell the coffee.
I don't care what language you use. I equate it.
But you should. That's your problem.
You're
taking
the one who said subservience.
Yeah, but you are the
Would you be
are-
subservient
you're
to
the
him?
one
That's
that
what you
tries
asked.
to trigger everybody with bringing in slavery.
It's
as
the same thing.
No, it isn't.
I will not be a
Because-
slave to Christ.
I'll tell you. Okay, here is how I will prove to you.
Let me say it again.
you're
I
wrong.
will not be a slave to Christ.
It is
to
not
Gandhi,
a slave. It is a
to
servant.
anybody.
Aved, the Hebrew, where that is a servant, and a servant in certain situations, and certainly in our situation as it concerns God, we have free will. Nobody took us from Africa on a ship and brought us to America or to Great Britain
and when I
chained and separated our
when
family.
I give someone service, that is different than being subservient, because I choose to do a thing for another person. To be subservient is to simply give up your will to that of someone else. I will not give up my will to any being. That would be slavery.
I say that the whole reason why it was so easy for you to leave was because you internally hate the idea of being subservient to a God.
Yes, slavery.
And that's why I say
giving up your will to someone else.
The slaves in the South didn't have the choice as to whether they could go or whether they can stay.
That's right. They didn't have control over their will.
God gives us free will.
Yeah, but you're saying that the free will has to be used to give it back to God. And so you don't actually have free will. What Paul said was, it's not me, but Christ who lives in me. Because Paul had given up. He had given up his free will and he had let someone else take him over. I will not give myself to be taken over by a God, by an alien, by a slave master, by a boss, by a parent, by a spouse. There is no combination of people that I would willingly bow down to and give up my will.
You know what? In general, with the government, for example, there are lots of laws that I adhere to, and there wouldn't have to be a penalty. I think they're right and they're good. And so I willingly am, an abider of the laws.
Are you subservient?
In many ways, it's the same thing. If I stop from doing something that I want to do because I think that there is a higher principle.
If the law demanded that you had to have an abortion, would you do it?
No, I would not.
Then you're not subservient. You just stop it. You are not in any way subservient.
I would then exercise my free
No,
will.
you're not subservient. If you think you can exercise your will while being subservient, you don't understand subservience.
If you play back yes, but you know what? We are all sinners. If we were totally subservient, then we would be perfect because we would be perfectly
okay. Well, I disagree with your idea that perfection, that subservience equals perfection.
I didn't say that I would. I said for the most part in terms of the.
Okay, well, you're saying that I am somehow a bad person because I will not be completely subservient to your God.
I'm not saying you're bad. I'm not saying you're a bad person.
Okay, well, I think it's completely justified not to be subservient.
You are in search of freedom from anything.
What's wrong with freedom?
And I'll tell you what's worse about it.
Wait, what's wrong with freedom? Why are you trying to paint this as a bad thing?
Again, you are straw manning me.
No, it's not. I'm saying what you're saying.
This is not legitimate argumentation. What I'm saying is because one minute you argue that you left the faith because you just all these doubts and your prayers weren't granted. But when we get down to the real reason, it's because
it's always the real reason with you. Whatever your new thing is the real reason.
The magnet that kept drawing you was to break the chains off of you, so to speak. I'll use your little slave.
Wait a minute. Everyone who finds himself a slave should do their best to be free. Now, I thought that you said that this wasn't about slavery.
But yes, well, I know. I was just using your imagery.
Okay, well, but you are saying even yourself that you are not subservient to the law, even though you tried to make that feint that you are subservient. So you're not subservient to anybody.
For the most part,
it's not for the most part. If you are subservient, it's all or nothing.
Because part of being part of being a good citizen is laws are created by citizens. So what if you have evil laws?
when you want to be and then not when you don't want to
But
be.
you know what? That applies to Christians too, because we all sin, which means that we are choosing to be not
And
subservient.
I
at
am
that
telling
point.
you that I choose to not be subservient to anyone.
But you don't want any
And
of that.
that's a good thing. And you keep trying to paint that as a bad thing
No,
somehow.
it's not a good thing when it comes to God.
Okay,
Not
that's
at
special
all.
pleading. I shouldn't be
No, it
subservient
is
to
not.
anyone except God.
When a situation it requires a difference, then it requires a difference.
So can I differ with God?
Can you differ with God?
Yeah,
Can
is it
you-
okay to sometimes say, yeah, God, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to be subservient.
That's what we all do. That's why we're all sinners,
Okay,
and God knows
but you're
that.
saying that's a sin. So you're saying it's not okay to do that.
It's not
Okay,
okay to
so
do that,
but you're saying it
we
is
have
okay
no
to do that in
other.
every other situation. In every other situation, you can use your own judgment as to when you will do service to someone and when you won't. But when it comes to God, you don't get to use your own
But
judgment.
we do get to use our own judgment. God gave us our own judgment to exercise with
Right,
free
but if we
will.
make the wrong decision, then we'll go to hell.
That is
Remember?
why
So
we have
that's
a redeemer. That is why we have a redeemer,
okay.
because God knows that we are incapable of living to his strict
Okay, so
criteria. But the
stop
challenge
trying
for
to
us
suggest that I'm
is
doing
to
something
try our
bad by
best.
saying I'm not going to be subservient, even if Jesus existed.
That is a rejection. That is where
I
the
reject being
apostasy.
subservient.
That is where the apostasy comes in.
If there's a
You're saying
God
from the
that requires
outset.
me to be subservient and groveling on my knees, fuck that guy.
See, that's what I'm saying.
But there
That's
should
always what
never be a
it's been
God that's
about.
saying that.
That
Why
is
is that a
what it's
good thing?
always been about. And you use
Why
these
is that a
other
good
things, oh, well,
thing?
God didn't answer my prayers. And I think that part of that is just a misinterpretation by you, but you use the first excuse to jump ship because you have there's
40
a
years in
greater
the church and you're
motive.
saying I use the
40
first excuse
years.
to
How
jump
long have
ship?
you
Are you
been
kidding
doubting?
me?
So let's talk about young
Wait a
David.
wait a minute. Whoa, 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 whoa. Wait,
David.
no, stop. I use the first excuse to jump ship. Are you kidding me? That doesn't
Let's
even
talk
make
about
sense
those
in the
40 years. Let's
that
talk
doesn't
about
make
those
sense
40
even in the
years.
context of things you're saying, Teddy.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You weren't 40 years a devout Christian. How long have you been harboring these serious doubts that have brought you to this crisis
So Teddy,
of faith? How long have you been a
excuse
crisis
me,
of faith?
Teddy. I'm just going to stop you here before you embarrass yourself some more.
I'm not embarrassing myself at all.
When I was a Christian, I was subservient.
And you
I did
hated every bit of it.
Excuse me. I did believe in subservience at the time.
And you
In
hated
fact,
every
I prostrated myself in subservience in multiple ways every damn day. So if what you're trying to say is, well, I left because I had a hard heart and demanded my freedom, you are so fucked up full of shit. You don't
and
know. You
that's
have
the
no
thing.
idea, Teddy.
That's the thing, David. You were doing it, but in your heart.
No,
you
what?
seething.
You're judging my
You
heart.
were seething.
I
Yes,
just
I am, because
whoa,
people don't
stop,
go.
stop. Wait a minute. I just told you that while I was a Christian, I believed in subservience and I was subservient. You're telling me that you're judging my heart and you don't believe me.
I'm judging your heart based on what you
Teddy,
have said
we're
about
done.
how you